First story. OP is roommates with the same girl his girlfriend's ex cheated with. He spends every night watching movies with her. Now, he's ghosted his girlfriend, saying he needs to study. So she visited his home only to find out he is sleeping in his roommate's bed naked. OP is still wondering why his girlfriend broke up with him. My girlfriend Celine 20F and I 21M have been dating for about 7 months now. But I had feelings for her for like 3 years beforehand. I have also been sharing a flat with 2 other girls and 1 other guy. One of the girls' names is Kaya, and we're pretty good friends. As it just so happens, Celine's ex cheated on her with Kaya. Kaya hadn't known they were together at the time. So when I first brought Celine over to my place earlier in our relationship, she told me about what happened. I realized then that things would be messy, and I asked Celine if this was a deal breaker for her. But she said she wasn't sure as she was aware that Kaya didn't realize she was facilitating cheating. The next day, Celine said she thought it over, and that she held no resentment towards Kaya, but was insecure about herself and felt uneasy that we lived in the same house. We both agreed to continue with the relationship and set our boundaries. One of them was that Kaya and I wouldn't sleep over in each other's rooms anymore. We used to have movie nights on Fridays. Kaya's room was the only room with a TV in my flat, and I'd sometimes fall asleep in her room during movie nights. Everything was platonic, and I told Celine about this. Let's move to the present, where our relationship is like a fairy tale. Being with Celine is pretty awesome. But my exams are coming up soon, and because I'm horribly underprepared, I needed to lock in. So I told Celine I would have to be a bit selfish and wouldn't be able to spend time with her or have much communication until they're done. For the past 3 weeks, my life has been wake up, spend the entire day or night at the library, then come home to sleep for like 5-6 hours, then go study again. It's a horrible routine, and I feel like a zombie, but I have too much content to catch up on and not enough time. I must also admit that I've not been in contact with Celine all that often. We only talked twice on FaceTime and texted very little. She tried initiating, but I had my phone shut off while studying and only replied when I left the library. On our second call, she said she felt neglected, and it was really starting to get to her, and she wanted to spend some time together. I apologized, told her I missed her too, and that she could come over to spend the night. But she came about an hour later than she was supposed to, and I fell asleep by then. She still stayed the night, but the next morning I felt that she was upset, and I fell asleep. Then I got really sick 3 days ago. I threw up at the library and asked Kaya to come pick me up. My other roommates are out of town, and Celine would have taken too long to get there. When I got into bed, I threw up all over my sheets. At this point, my memory of what happened is foggy. I was very drowsy and not thinking straight. Rather than cleaning up and setting up new sheets, I texted Celine. I was very sick and had vomited over my bed. She asked if I could sleep over at hers. I got no reply, so I went downstairs and slept on the couch. When I woke up the next morning, I was asleep on Kaya's bed, shirtless. I had no clue about how I got here. But Celine came to check up on me and walked in on me like this. This was when I woke up, and Celine was very upset. She yelled, "How could you?" And before I had a chance to say anything, she left. Kaya told me that when she saw me asleep on the couch, she offered to let me sleep on her bed instead. I have no recollection of this. I probably took my shirt off because I felt hot at some point during the night. She also said she slept on the couch, and we didn't share the bed. I've been trying to reach out to Celine, but she blocked my number, WhatsApp, and Instagram. We have 2 mutual friends, but they both haven't replied to any of my texts. My fever died down yesterday night, so I went to Celine's to clarify the situation. But her roommate said she wasn't going to talk and made me leave. This whole situation just feels so horrible. I love the relationship that I have had with Celine, and the fact that it's probably over makes me feel so distraught. I also reflected on how I've been recently, and I realized that a lot of blame goes on me. My exams aren't a reason to just completely shut myself out of my relationship, and I need to work on being able to juggle life and studies at the same time. Other than her finding me asleep on Kaya's bed, she probably had a lot of animosity and upset amalgamating over the last 3 weeks of me not being in contact. It's painful knowing I made a very unnecessary decision, and had I put in more effort, it wouldn't have cost me a great person out of my life. Comments. Mountain Animator 859. You spoke with your girlfriend twice in 3 weeks. That's not how relationships work, buddy. Automatic Shine 60512. This girl already slept with her last boyfriend. The fact that she even decided she could deal with you guys living together is huge. Then you tell her you have platonic movie nights that end up with you guys sleeping together in her room. At that point, I would have bowed out, but she still just asked for a simple boundary. I've never been sick to the point where I genuinely don't remember taking my own clothes off and getting in a different bed sober. You hardly talk to her or make time for her for weeks. A simple text or phone call is very easy. And at that point, I'd assume something was up. Then she literally finds you in that girl's bed. You're either lying and having an interest in that girl, you were sod, or you didn't actually care about your girlfriend. I'd be out. Update. I'll start by saying now that this post will be very long, but will add little to nothing new. The most expected outcome is what happened. The reason I'm posting this is because I saw Celine for the final time a couple days ago, and I also want to clear the air on some matters. For the sake of tracking time, let's call day 1 the day Celine broke up with me. Day 4 was when my initial post was published. I sat my final exam on day 7 and didn't actually check up on the post at all till day 8. I was very, very shocked reading the comments. To be blatantly honest, I wasn't expecting like 1,000 people calling me a huge bellend. I knew I made a mistake, but in my head, I thought I was a good person. You know how you just kind of perceive yourself to always try and do things with a good intention, so you think you can't ever be a bad person. I don't know if that makes sense. But reading the post opened up my perspective, made me realize that the relationship was not salvageable, and also gave me depth into the hurt I caused Celine. I shattered her trust completely, and was just not a good boyfriend for the entire month leading up to the breakup. So, I just didn't contact her. As I'll mention later on, I was not in a good headspace, and I distanced myself because I was an even bigger arse than I let on previously. On day 12, she messaged me to ask for her iPad back. She'd let me borrow it for my notes. We last met on day 15 when she came to collect it, among other things. We were both silent the whole time she was there, which must have only been like 5 minutes or so. She returned some of my stuff I'd left in her apartment, and when she was about to leave, I told her I was sorry. She said okay. I said I never meant to hurt her. She, again, just said okay. I figured nothing I could say was the right thing at this point, and we said goodbye. So, like I said, the very expected outcome occurred. I can't lie and say that I'm instantly a better person now. I'm not. I want to be better, but I can't become a better person in a couple of weeks, and will need to really work on my character in general. As for Celine, I can only pray and wish for the best for her. I'm going to answer some of the main questions that people had. I never went into the full depth of the story, because there is a lot of context behind it all, and I just never expected the post to reach so many people. Did Kaya know about Celine's boundaries? Yes, I told her about the day Celine, and I discussed our boundaries. She seemed to be very understanding, and we have both kept our distance since. How did you lose consciousness from vomiting? It was from dehydration. On day 1, I went to the hospital at noon because my condition wasn't getting any better. I had a temperature of 104, and a blood test showed I was severely dehydrated. I was put on a drip. None of this was mentioned because I never expected this to be a matter of criticism and thought very ill sufficed for it in my previous post. What's the need to study so hard? This is the question that needs a lot of context to understand, and I'll do my best to provide it now. I'm Indian, and my father is very similar to those strict Indian dads that you'll often see portrayed in movies. Take every Indian dad stereotype, and you'll get my dad. He's in the military and is about as strict a man as you can imagine. He wanted to force me to join the army. I wanted to choose my own career path, which was computer science, and we had a huge rift occur between us because of it. I moved from India to the UK for my studies, and one of the only reasons he agreed to pay for my tuition fees was because A, the university I'd gotten into is prestigious, so he was happy with that, and B, he had a way to monitor my grades, and could use this as leverage to make me study harder. In year 1, I did not do so splendidly. I finished with a grade average of 63%, which, although it was like the median score, upset my dad a lot. He got extremely physical and smacked me in the face a few times, and I had some bruises after. He also threatened to not pay for my final year if I didn't get an average of 70% this year, which would mean that the entire 2 years I've spent here would go to waste. I'm an international student, so I can't get a loan either. Furthermore, I did really badly on my summatives earlier in the year. I got a 41 on an exam worth 13% of my entire grade, and a 52 and a 59 on 2 others worth 6% each. Celine also knows everything about my dad. We had a whole conversation before I went absent in our relationship, where I told her I was very far behind on my studies, and was afraid of the consequences this would cause. We agreed I should try and study as much as I can till my exams are over, and she said she'd be fine with being in contact less often. Why did you barely stay in contact with Celine? Simply put, I was a bad boyfriend. This is going to sound awful, but I think a part of me just didn't want to have to deal with being in a relationship. I was overwhelmed, and it felt like a burden to have to talk to someone. I completely acknowledge how horrible that is of me to even think about it. When I had those thoughts, I just downplayed them and let myself believe it was just me being cranky. Anyway, there's just never an excuse to go weeks without talking to your girlfriend, and I was an arsehole for doing that. However, I never, under any circumstances, had any intentions of cheating on her. I didn't want to deal with anyone, period. And so I didn't want to be around Kaya either. I mention this because a lot of people speculated that Kaya and I had something going on, which isn't the case. I just wanted to be alone until my exams were over. Why did Kaya invite you to her bed? I asked her, and she said the following. I was on my way out to an overnight study session, which meant no one would be home, so I thought you might as well sleep on my bed then. I didn't think it would be such a big deal considering how bad of a condition you were in. I thought Celine would understand. I didn't get in bed when I got home. I slept on the couch. I could not sleep in my roommate's bed because they were out of town and locked their rooms. Kaya throws parties every once in a while, so they lock their rooms in case. I think that's as much as I can say about this now. There's not a great deal more to add than an apology to those who read all of this and still aren't content with my answers. As for what happens next, I don't think I'll be sprinting into a new relationship anytime soon. I'm long overdue for some self-reflection, and along with trying to enjoy my summer holidays, I hope I can figure myself out and try to do better from now on. TLDR, we broke up, and I now realize I'm not ready for relationships for a while. Comments. Seikoki. I'm glad Celine stood on business, at least. Chonkosaurus Rex. I'm just genuinely curious about Kaya's thought process if you're telling the truth. She knew she was the person Celine's cheated on her with. She knew about the boundary. When she finds you sick on the couch with something that can be contagious for all she knows, she physically helps you get into her bed, risking contagion, where you could absolutely have ended up throwing up again, making a mess out of her bed as well. She then went to sleep on the couch. Your potentially contagious germs would be all over. In her situation, I would have stripped your bed so the sickness wouldn't fester and thrown it in the washer. I would have checked in to see if you didn't need to go to the hospital, put out something to drink, and get some painkillers. I would have contacted Celine and let her know how you were doing, and that you would probably really appreciate it if she dropped by to check in on you. No boundaries are disrespected. I don't risk getting sick, and you won't have a nasty surprise in the morning. But for some reason, Kaya just had to get you into her bed, while drastically increasing the risk of getting sick or a bed full of sick. And NSPP. Second story. Entitled parents who kicked me out as a teen because I wasn't paying enough rent came back after 5 years demanding my house, claiming it's unfair I have a nicer house than them, and how I owe it to them. So I kicked them out. Now they stole my AC, and I had them arrested. I'm going to start this off by saying that if you have a house and don't have cameras, get cameras. I have some now. But I should have gotten them sooner. I live in a pretty typical manufactured home in Arizona. My parents also live in one just a few streets over. Despite how close we are, I'm VLC because they are just bad people. They treated me well as a kid. But things changed as soon as I was in my late teens. I was expected to do more and pay my way as soon as I finished high school. That was fair. I was an adult by then, after all. But my parents wanted a lot more in rent than what I'd have to pay to get my own apartment. I'd have had next to nothing left of my monthly paycheck if I'd given them what they wanted. So I refused to give them more than a fair amount, plus a share in utilities. And I started buying my own food as well. My father openly said this was not good enough, and my parents actually filed official paperwork to evict me when I refused to cater to their demands. I left home and got an apartment with my best friend. 5 years later, I bought my own house in a neighborhood not far from my parents. It's just a manufactured home on a small property. But it was so damn cheap that I couldn't turn it down. And my monthly mortgage isn't bad either. I even moved my best friend in to help me cover the bills. We were already used to living in the same space, and the house gave us much more room. I may even let another friend move in to get some more rent money for the mortgage, because we've got one room that's actually left unused right now since the house is a 3-bedroom house. My parents, though, somehow didn't like my independence from them. Did they want me to fail or something? I don't know. But the incident that caused the VLC was when they demanded that I trade houses with them. Yes, you read that correctly. They actually wanted to trade. Their manufactured home is smaller and older than mine and has one fewer bedroom. And their yard is smaller, too. Not that either of us have any grass. It is Arizona, after all. When they first saw my place, they looked pissed. After a couple more visits, my father actually said it wasn't fair that I was doing better than them. And I was rubbing my nicer house in their faces. It's just an old, manufactured home in one of the hottest states in the US. Seriously, what's to brag about? But I guess having something even slightly better than what my parents had irked them. And as I've already said, they actually demanded we trade houses because of it. My friend who lives with me literally fell onto the couch laughing when they said that. And I couldn't help but join in. My father said it was not funny, and to give him what he wants. When I recovered my composure, I said he and my mother were not entitled to my house, or anything I own, for that matter. And then I told them to get the F out. After that, we barely spoke. And then the pandemic hit. It didn't really change my life much. I like the peace and quiet, and my friend knows to leave me alone most of the time. My father, however, got laid off, and he struggled to find another job. He ended up working in the local Mart O'Walls for half a year before getting a better paying job. I did get a kick out of seeing him there when I was shopping for groceries. But as much as I hate him, I'm not going to call him a bad employee. He actually did fine. But during that time, he and my mother kept calling me and asking for money. And I know what y'all are thinking. Don't lend them anything. They didn't want loans. They wanted handouts. Why? They raised me, and I owed them. I said if they didn't want the cost of raising a kid, they shouldn't have had one. A few weeks ago, my mother called me, begging for money because their dinosaur of a window AC unit finally crapped out. I told them I was not giving them anything, and they were too cheap to replace that old AC unit for a long time, so I wasn't going to buy them a new one. My mother then complained about how I have two in my house, and the least I could do was give them one. I then said that maybe if she and my father weren't always pissing away their money on beer and MJ all the time, they'd have the money to buy another AC. Then I said I wasn't giving them one of mine or any money. End of story. Only it wasn't the end of the story. A few days later, I came home from work to find that my house had been broken into. My front door locks were drilled out, and both of my window AC units were gone. Nothing else was stolen, but they went out of their way to make a huge mess for some stupid reason. Probably to make it look like a typical robbery or something. I knew it had to have been my parents and called the police. I told the police that I heavily suspected my parents of the theft, because they act entitled to my stuff, even though I'm a grown man who doesn't live with them. I went with the police to my parents' house, and sure enough, they had both my AC units going in their windows. When confronted by my parents, they obviously denied the theft. Then they claimed they already owned the AC units. But statements from their neighbors said otherwise. But my parents still denied the theft. I'd bought both AC units online years ago, which means I had no receipts for them. So I figured my only option was to look for witnesses in my own neighborhood. And as luck would have it, a neighbor across the street has security cameras. And the edge of one of them caught just enough for me to see my parents showing up in my father's truck. My father could be seen walking with a cordless power drill in hand. And a few minutes later, they came back to the truck with my AC units. Then I went back in to ransack the place, I'm guessing. With this evidence in hand, the police had cause to arrest my parents. At first, both of them acted like they'd done nothing wrong. But I convinced the police to let me do the talking. I said they could either return the AC units to my home and clean up the mess they made, or I'd let the police arrest them both right there. They'd already stolen from me, lied to the police, trespassed, vandalized my house, broke my front door locks, and there was video evidence of what they'd done. If I pressed charges, they were both going to jail for sure. My parents looked deflated, then asked for a moment to talk with each other in their bedroom. I heard a lot of shouting from both of them, and I could hear my mother yelling that my father was an idiot, and he was trying to blame me in turn. After about 5 minutes of that, they came back out looking even more deflated and said they'd return the AC units and stop bothering me for money if I didn't press charges. I said they were going to clean up the mess in my house and buy new locks for my front door as well. And then I wanted written apologies from both of them on top of it. They begrudgingly agreed and even got a police escort back to my house. My father was forced to put the AC units back in my windows, and then left my mother to clean up the huge mess they made while he went out and bought replacement locks for my front door. He was gone about an hour and came back with a new stainless steel lock set to replace the knob and deadbolt. Then he had to help my mother finish cleaning. During this time, I let the two cops just sit and watch them while drinking soda. They said it was very entertaining. After everything was cleaned up, I gave my parents each a piece of paper and a pencil, then told them to write out apologies to me for what they'd done. My father looked especially pissed and said I was treating him like a child. I said he was acting like one, and he never stopped treating me as a child either. This was just me holding him accountable, and I could have sent him to jail, but I felt like this was better for teaching him a lesson. He then kind of snorted and started writing. My mother wrote out a good apology, but my father's was pretty half-arsed and passive-aggressive. But I didn't care. It seemed to kill him a little inside to have to do it. And when he was done, he left without speaking to me. My mother said she was sorry, and that she'd leave me alone, then followed after him. The two cops said they thought the whole thing was hilarious, and then thanked me for giving them an excuse to take a break while on the job before leaving. Not long after, I shelled out to get some cameras for the exterior of my house. So if someone tries to break in again, I'll get it on video. I only have 2 cameras, but I added a couple more fake ones that look real enough just to scare people off. I haven't heard a peep from my parents, but their next door neighbor told me they went and bought a new AC unit. I guess they had the money for one after all. It makes me wonder how high they were when they thought it was a good idea to steal from me. Maybe having lean pockets for a while will teach them. Then again, they are who they are, after all. Edit. I've been questioned about how I got a house when I was only 23 years old. To start off with, the place was really cheap. In Arizona, you can find old, manufactured homes on tiny properties for a very reasonable amount. I also kept it and still have pretty good credit. The house and land were only $55K. The house was a little bit of a fixer-upper too. But I was able to put $10,000 on a down payment, and I was able to get approved for a loan for the rest. The house is no prize, and by now it's at least 30 years old. But it's home, and once I have it paid off, I'll feel much more financially secure. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.